All right, it is 10 a.m. and we're going to get this meeting called to order. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. This is, for the record, officially our October meeting of the Broker Responsibility Working Group. And we're going to start with a little bit of housekeeping.
Okay, track housekeeper here. Oh, here's Brian. We'll wait for him to join real quick.
There we go. Hey, Brian. Good morning.
Hi. All right, good morning, everybody. Oh, exactly. Okay, let me try again. Sometimes it just does that. All right, good morning, everyone. We've got a pretty strong virtual presence today for a variety of reasons, which is fine. I will ask that everyone who is on the committee, just make sure you keep your cameras on. And then as a reminder, we ask that you mute when possible, just because of, like I said this in the meeting, it's like inevitably it's the day to do the lawn or like whatever is when these meetings happen. So just to keep that background noise out. And although that said, please feel free to like engage and unmute and speak as though you were here, because it is the same. There's the raise hand function if you want to use it. I mean, as a member, you can always start talking and do that, but you can also raise your hand. There's a little smiley face, looks like this. For us, it's at the bottom. Sometimes it's at the top. Don't forget to unraise your hand. It will not do it for you. And I think that is it.
All right, thank you very much. So just a couple quick notes before we jump in. Number one, we were kind of hoping that we would have some action on some of the things that we sent to the commission in our last meeting, but that did not happen. My understanding is that there was a significant bottleneck at the governor's office and that those rules just didn't make it through in time for the commission meeting. So hopefully those will be addressed in the November meeting, full meeting of the commission. And then the other thing I just wanted to note, because we've talked about it every meeting this year, is that the broker responsibility course booklet was approved as it was written, and it is in the process of getting set up with all the additional materials and pagination and all of that fun stuff to make it pretty and presentable. And then I believe next month that the real estate center starts the trainings, to train the trainers.
They may have already started.
They started.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the first day.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Yesterday was the first day. I lied. So it's exciting. I think when you see it, you'll like this book a lot. It really is designed to be more workshoppy and more hands-on and interactive, and really get the participants thinking like a broker, even if sometimes they don't, especially our team leaders. And so I'm excited about it. All right, moving to item number 3 on our agenda is public comment. We had 2 pieces of public comment received. If you look in your meeting materials, the first one was about our proposed, well, several of our proposed rules actually, but in particular in favor of our proposed rules for increasing supervision by a broker. Also the same about having to respond within 2 days to that rule we proposed. I'm not really sure about the comment about the also directly respond. I'm not. I think the statute kind of already dictates that. The only thing I can think there is that somebody must have responded through an agent or something like that, or through an office manager or something.
Yeah, I think they're talking about that the director themselves, the broker themselves needs to respond, but if you tell the team lead or the office manager and they get that directly from the broker, that should be a response, right?
Right. I think that is the case. And then the last bit on that one was talking about, what we've lovingly in these meetings called rent-a-brokers, the LLC type companies that, have the break up with your broker and start your own quote unquote brokerage. And we've talked about that, and I suspect we will talk about it more in detail at some point in the non-distant future, because it is concerning, the lack of supervision there. the lack of accountability, in my opinion, the lack of accountability on the rental broker. So, and then we had another one that I'm going to suggest we hold off on making comments to until we get a little bit later in this meeting when we actually discuss that topic. But it has to do with the point system we created and the 4 out of 5 years rule. So if y'all are good with that, we'll just move on to item number 4, which is an update on our ongoing discussion about property management. And
Yes.
so, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Baker has his hand up. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. And you mentioned this on that first comment there about the challenge with broker accountability, lack of training and so forth. You say, well, we've kind of talked about it, we can talk about it some more. This is a huge problem. This is not a small problem. And it's getting worse. So at some level, I think we are, in fact, the focus group that should really be addressing this. So what are our plans in moving forward? I remember in previous groups we talked about, and we joked about the phrase, rent a broker kind of thing. And we thought we had done some things in the rules to kind of semi-address that. I'm going through a situation right now that hopefully will not end up in a lawsuit situation, but the problem we have on the other side is the listing agent is the broker, and feels no responsibility whatsoever. I mean, he just is the broker doing the deal, working through the process. And I understand this is a regulatory thing. I presume it is from the TREC standpoint. But what are our thoughts on this? Or is this something that we're going to be very specific on future agendas and deal with how we can work with the brokers? When you look at Texas, the broker group versus all the people that are sponsored by a broker, to me, the whole original point of the whole broker responsibility course and doing all this was when we looked to say, who can we hold accountable for what all the agents do out there? Well, it's the brokers. And that's why we started off with the broker responsibility course and moved forward. That's all under our tutelage. So just help me with a little bit of sense of kind of what our thoughts are here and where we think we're going to be going and what can we do to address this, or is this way over my pay grade, just something we can't be dealing with at all?
No, I don't think so, Bob. Just to clarify, are you talking specifically about the quote unquote rent-a-broker? Or are you talking about just in general?
Well, I guess both. I'm allowing a broker, and I know we'll have later a conversation about sponsoring broker versus broker kind of thing, but allowing a broker to have people under their license and they're not following the broker responsibility rules that we've got in 535.2. I know we're going through the process. The TREC is going through the process of, making sure people understand how to file a complaint, go through the process and deal with that. We're trying to ramp up some accountability. But these brokers who feel no responsibility, and you're right, in the letter that the fellow sent or person sent, we're getting a lot of aggressive recruiting by people say, hey, come to us, get all your commission, pay us $10 a month and have a nice day. We can't have that happen in our industry. I mean, we've got to do something to create some accountability.
Well, so we're going to have a conversation a little bit later about the difference between an individual broker and a sponsoring broker.
Right. Okay.
It was your request in our last meeting.
Yes.
And to go back and look at some of the things that have been talked about in the previous group that you were a part of.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do that today.
Okay, and that's a good step, but in my opinion, that's a different conversation. One, making sure that process of going, today I'm a broker, tomorrow I'm going to be a sponsoring broker. That's a different conversation than all brokers who are sponsoring brokers have a responsibility to do the things that the good brokers are already trying to do for the agents under their license. And to me, that's a separate conversation, that accountability for the brokers out there. And I will say that, owning up to the fact that as a sponsoring broker, I've gone through the process of track complaints. I've found situations where I didn't do what I thought I should have done. So I understand that even good brokers who are trying to comply, things happen. But what just drives me nuts is the brokers aren't even trying, and we're just letting them slide, or it seems like we are.
So we can absolutely talk about that at any time you want. Playing
I'd
devil's.
like to, if we can kind of put that on a future agenda for our next meeting, perhaps. I think it's a big subject, and I don't have a lot of really good answers. I don't like to come to a problem with more pieces of the problem than any possible solutions. But I think in this group, given the depth and breadth of experience we have in this group, unless I'm the only one that's having this challenge in whatever marketplace you're in, I'd like to see us really be able to address this and deal with this at some level and come up with some potential solutions, whether or not this ends up with some kind of a task force or subgroup or something. But if we can put forward some suggestions on how we can address it and really do that in depth at maybe at our next meeting, I'd love to see us try to grab hold of it.
Bob, I think you're also alluding to not just transactions. I think you're alluding to advertisements and social media content and things like that. Am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. All of that. Absolutely correct.
So, yeah. Bill, go ahead, Bill.
I wanted to sort of support Bob in what he's talking about. I had a different spin on it, though. I don't think we need to talk about it today, but I think down the road it's something we probably need to look at. My issue was really understanding that the way teams and companies are now operating may be creating a different sense of who's responsible and a different accountability issue. And I think that letter from that one comment that we got sort of raised that issue to me, that if in fact the business practice of firms are now changing and it's really creating a different chain of supervision, that to me is something that we probably need to look at and see if in fact the world is changing. It's not so much that that we're providing the supervision or not. It may be that because of the organizational structures that we need to manage that supervision in a different way, or at least be aware that that's what's happening. So you know, I think there is something to talk about down the road, and maybe we could have some supportive information to give us a little bit of background on where the large firms are going and some of these teams are going and how people are really organizing their companies, and then see if that impacts any of our legislative or regulatory you know, thought processes.
It's a good point. There has been a proliferation of different, not only teams and groups, but different brokerage models, and you know, the virtual versus not virtual, where you don't have an everyday contact with your agents a lot. You know, there's been a huge difference there since a lot of these rules were written. So maybe it is time to take a look at that. It's a good point.
And so, to the concept of what I'd like to see us, how we move forward in this, is under the concept of enforcement through education. That if we set up the parameters for this is how brokers need to be responsible as they work it, I don't care if they want to have 100 agents and they want to get $10 a month and that's their business model, they can do whatever they want. But by gosh, they ought to make sure they're responsible for training those people, and those people are accountable and they know what they're doing for the public out there, because every time one of those agents screws up, it reflects on all of us. It creates a harder problem for all of us. So I think that enforcement through education, creating those parameters, so when people do things like that, the public and other agents have a venue they can go through. They've got a conduit there, say, okay, here's what they should be doing. Here's what TREC requires. and they haven't. So now we've got that ability to file a complaint because we've got those parameters that are set up. And maybe that's part of what we can kind of move forward and consider.
All right, sir.
Move on. That's enough. Bob's had his, so move on. I get that. Thank you for listening to me briefly.
We will add this to the next agenda, and we will have an in-depth
Thank
discussion
you.
in our next meeting.
I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. All right, so now we'll talk about our ongoing discussion regarding property management oversight of that. And Vanessa will give us an update on ESAC.
Yes, so ESAC did vote to, I think I let you guys know this last time, they did vote to open up that property management outline. They started work on it at the most recent meeting, and I think based on me looking at draft minutes yesterday, that the recording of that video will be up soonish. And you can take a look at that discussion. It was interesting, it looks like perhaps they're gonna do more of a change in the time allocation to certain topics and strike some of the introductory stuff, because the thought was, seemed like the areas where folks felt that were the most important work didn't have enough time dedicated to them. I think if it's something that you have particular interest in that outline and like what's being taught there, you could certainly take a look at that meeting. The outline for that course is in the materials, and you could provide some public comment because they're going to talk about it again at ESAC. It would also, I know that staff is doing a little bit of research to that end as well. So you could also send your comments to me so I can kind of collect everything. I think there was a little bit, I don't know that there's like a true expertise in property management amongst that group, so they're trying to reach out and that's been helpful. Like one had reached out to a couple of folks that he knew and they gave feedback. So if you want to take a look at that, you can. So for today, I thought we've been talking about this for a while, right? And I did a little bit of a summary of all of the things that we've talked about as I have it from the last meeting, sort of the solid bullets. And I was going to bring them up, I'll summarize them. And then if this group wants, you can take a vote to make recommendations. And you are welcome to ask me about the legal pros and cons. I think I've given them to you, maybe to the point of being annoying. So if you have questions on how a recommendation might impact something, please feel free to, ask me those questions. I think and so I don't think it'll be a surprise. But as a reminder, here's where I saw us as landing. I reviewed our agenda item 4 on the online minutes. So one idea was the separate IABS for property management. And that would require statutory change. So if that is going to be a recommendation, that's something that would need to get in now. I don't think you're too late, but it could be. Separate, so there was a topic about a separate license. It seems like that was not the way, but I'm bringing it up as a reminder of everything we've talked about. There's the recommendation about that TREC, and this is the one I think that the group sort of ultimately had landed on for discussion, was the broker sending in notice of who they have that is, authorized to do property management for them. And so there was the discussion of, is that something that's outward facing? And we've gone back and forth on that. And it's like, well, we don't want this to look like an endorsement, right? Because we've never, that could actually be more harmful to the consumer of them thinking, oh, look, this person is certified, or, they'll view it as a certification. Mm-hmm. But the idea that we really left with, that everyone was digesting, was still sending in that notice of, so Ty would send in his form that's, hey, Joe Smith is doing property, he's under me and he's doing property management, whatever that would look like. And then that would be something we talked about, kind of like an internal checkbox that TREC would maintain. Now, we'll say use of checkboxes will ultimately probably be deferred to the new system, just because that's where we are. But that is where, in reviewing what we were talking about, that seemed to be where folks were. Generally, there was a lot of discussion about it, and I think, you know, we've been on this for a while, so if you want to vote to make a recommendation, chance will be there at the November commission meeting to take forward whatever this group wants to do.
So thoughts on that?
The internal list held by Trek, I think that would be better, like you said, than having a forward facing that would kind of almost appear that these were approved, endorsed, Trek property managers. So that's not what we want. And I think having a different IABS that's kind of tricky too. So, I mean, because the current IABS says broker says buyer or tenant, seller, landlord. It already says that information on there. Yeah, it's already overlapping. So I don't think we need a whole specific one for just property management.
I think the idea that internal checkbox is if somebody's practicing it, they get in trouble, then that's reverts back to the broker being responsible for notifying they're authorized to do property management. It could be a way to say, hey, you're penalized as a broker because you didn't send in your form saying that they were authorized to do property management. Possibly, it could be like a trigger, basically. And then maybe instead of going to step one, slap on the hand, slap on the wrist or whatever, you go to penalty. You know, I'm just thinking out loud, guys.
That's a good idea.
But maybe it's just kind of one of those things where if anything does happen and they didn't do their due diligence or they didn't do proper notification, then basically at least there's some trigger that lets the commission know, hey, look, obviously maybe this broker is not managing their people properly, and it's a virtual brokerage, and so they're kind of like running free, you know, whatever, free range.
Free range agents.
Yeah, free range agents. But they're, you know, it kind of holds that accountability in place, and it's not a big step that would really cause any issue, I would think. At least for me, it wouldn't, because I'll never do it. I'll never send it in.
Well,
that's right. Because I don't have anybody.
Sure,
Yeah.
but what Ty's doing is what Ty's doing.
So
Question.
before, hey, we have 3 hands up.
Okay,
So
sorry,
just a
guys.
second, sorry. So before we get too deep into this discussion, I would just, as a simple reminder, statute literally gives us 3 words that define property management. The 3 words are control of rent. That's it. So it's not like we're talking about managing certain activities or anything else. The statute is really simple in three words, control of rent. So on that note, Mr. Roth.
I was just going to comment. I just think that I don't have enough information or direction right now to suggest that we make any kind of formal choice out of these 3. I'm not sure that any of the 3 items that we brought up are in fact appropriate. I think that I'm not really clear as to what problem we're really trying to solve, and I'm not really clear that we've identified solutions to a particular problem yet either. And again, I think that it seems like the property management issue seems to be keep coming up, and maybe we need to get a task force, or maybe we need to get a group to really sort of crystallize what our main real issue is that we're trying to protect the consumer from, and also regulate you know, our folks that are in that field, and then maybe try to find out what the issue is, and then try to maybe crystallize some potential solutions. But I'm not prepared to, I don't think we're prepared right now to move this ball forward in any way.
Okay. Brian.
Well, good morning, all. Vanessa, thank you for the summary. I think that's helpful. I agree that I think the IABS form is a one form fits all. And I think it works. I know that there's been recent changes on it, and I'm sure there'll be future changes on it to further clarify what the broker's responsibility and what the agent's role is, and towards a consumer and a client. I don't like the idea of a separate license for property management, not only because it requires a statutory change, but it takes us down a rabbit hole. Then what other disciplines would require a specific license? Farm and ranch, commercial, etc. So again, I think that one change for property management, it would not be appropriate. However, the third change, I disagree with Bob or Bill just a little bit. I think it is a move in the right direction and it's in line with our charge as a broker responsibility group, and just requiring a broker to say, designate, here's my property manager, just as we currently charge a broker to say, here's my delegated supervisor, or, for team leads or group leads, et cetera. That's using a system that we already have in place, and it's consistent. And so I think it is a step in the right direction to raise the bar for broker responsibility, to say, this is my property manager, I'm designating them as such, and therefore I'm taking responsibility, or I'm demonstrating to the public what my responsibility is as a broker for their behaviors and for their actions as a property manager. I don't think it's a cure-all for the problems that Trek sees in complaints about property managers, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Very good, sir. Thank you. Yasmin?
Hello, everybody. First of all, Vanessa, can you repeat the very first option? Sorry, I'm a little slow today. I'm on meds, so my brain's a little fuzzy.
Oh, that's okay. The first bullet I had was the separate IABS.
Okay.
Then it was separate license, and then it was the submit to track.
Got it. So I kind of agree with Brian in the sense that, and I think what everybody was talking about, I think maybe our first easy step would be like the designated of the property manager. I really honestly do think in the long run, we probably should do some statute changes. I know it's a whole, like you said, a big rabbit hole that would be crazy, but it's such a different world to do property management that there should be some special licensing. But I know that then it's like, well, what about farm and ranch, and what about everything else? But I don't know. I think we're too far away from that now. So a small step towards it would probably be the designated, just showing who does it, and then see what difference that makes. With complaints and things like that. And, if it doesn't make a big change, then we probably do need to look at something more drastic. But those are kind of my 2 cents.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I sort of echo those sentiments, in that, an IABS specific to property management is going to be real short.
Mm-hmm.
Control of rent, sign here.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense there. But I do like the idea of having hey, these are the people that I, as a broker, deem competent to be a property manager. Because, we've heard the stories time and time again of the broker has no idea that their agent is doing
Right.
property management. The property manager has a quote unquote trust account set up on their own. It's not the broker's account, and all these different things. And so I think that it does, give some, I'm involved in my business, and I know who's authorized to do this, and it makes sense.
Let me throw one idea. I think that's a really valid point too. What about this though? What if there's a broker, and I'm just throwing this out to be a devil's advocate right now. What if there's a broker, let's just say you and I are doing property management. We know what we're doing. Well, then we send somebody else out there, Joe Bob, right, to go do property management. But we're not sure he knows what he's doing. But to cover our tails, we're not going to send in that form. Because then if he gets in trouble, I can say, oh, I didn't know he was doing it. What's your thought on that?
Now, if Joe Bob has spoken with you as the broker, and can show Trek that you know that they are doing property management, and then you just didn't turn it into Trek, then you're in trouble.
Mhm.
And on the other hand, as the broker, like Chance said, if you are the broker, because this happened to me, and this guy's not with my company anymore. In my policies and procedures, it says nobody is allowed to do property management. And then I got a call from, and I have them sign it as well. I got a call from someone who said, yeah, he's been managing my property, and I was like, what? And so if you have no one turned into Trek and your policies and procedures says nobody is authorized, then as the broker, you're not the one that's getting the hand slap, because everybody in the company knows they are not authorized to do property management. They're doing something out on their own.
Yeah.
Makes sense to
Yeah.
me. Cool.
So as it is now, you can get licensed today and be a property manager tomorrow
Correct,
without any experience.
correct.
Don't you have to take, no, you don't have to take the property management. Hey,
That's concerning.
And that's totally, totally wrong.
yeah.
Okay, do we, when we're talking,
Which opens up another.
that's a little bit, so that's another, let's bullet that as a separate bullet, right? The education component. And then going back to what we were just discussing, when we're talking about property management, is everyone talking about the same thing? Like, are we talking we've got the jurisdiction over Trek, over leasing, that kind of stuff. Are we thinking when we say property management generically, that kind of
Yes.
stuff too? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not.
You're not.
What?
I'm thinking
I'm thinking control of rent.
rents, yeah.
Control of rent.
I mean,
Because
You
I
can
was-
lease a property and not property manage.
Exactly, because
But usually if you're leasing, if you're leasing and you're property managing, you've tied everything all together.
yeah,
It's part of your agreement.
right. Yeah, because I have a client who
But they're
wants
two
to
separate real
find,
estate activities. as
Right.
defined.
Yes.
Well, that's why I'm trying to make sure that we are all talking about the same thing.
Right.
When we
Right.
talk about what this disclosure would be about.
This would not be about leasing.
no,
This would be
because
about-
No.
we have clients that we help find a tenant for the property, and they are going to manage it themselves, not
Or
us.
have another
That's not
company
property
manage it,
management.
you know?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
have another company manage it.
Exactly.
Okay. Is everybody,
Mr. Sales?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you, Vanessa. It doesn't solve an education issue, and Trek does not have a certification program necessarily for property management, but it's a step. It's a step, if I designate a property manager in my firm, and then a consumer says, "Oh, here's my property manager." They click on that licensee. They can see their education. Oh, he has been certified, or he has gotten that particular education. You can see that, and so it's not a solve all, but it's a step. And I think because it requires the broker, or puts the onus on the broker to say, "This is my guy or this is my gal who controls rent for our clients." Then I think it raises the perception of responsibility for that broker. If I'm going to designate this individual as my person, then I better make sure that they're doing it correctly. And tied to your point, well, I'm not going to designate anybody because I don't want to be held accountable. Well, it all comes into play once the complaint is filed, whether you've designated them as your PM or not. If they're practicing property management and they're a bad actor and doing it incorrectly, you're still responsible as the broker. You're responsible for their activities. So I think it just raises the bar and raises the awareness of responsibility on that broker to make sure that their people are doing it correctly.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Baker?
Maybe some clarification here, and maybe Vanessa and several people have mentioned and talked about, the broker. We already have the responsibility for the brokers to have in writing how they what they authorize their agents to do. and this seems to be a little in that direction. I'm not sure I understand if we do the check mark thing where someone is indicated, the broker's indicated, yes, this person is authorized to do property management, totally internal thing. Someone would know about that if they went to that person's website, Trek website for some reason. But when the broker does that, checks that off, is that some communication from that broker to Trek or to whoever that this agent now is allowed to advertise that they're a property manager and go through that process? I'm not sure I'm clear on what happens and what we're communicating to each other when someone does that checkbox. So Vanessa, if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
So I think I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, right? So this is an idea that came up at the last meeting, or maybe even the meeting before of, I think as I recall the argument, because like from the Trek side, if nothing's gonna display outward, right? It's going to truly be a collection and an internal checkbox. I'm not sure what the true value is yet, and I'm not enforcement, I know Mike is watching, of us having that information is. I think the point that was made at the last meeting was, okay, it's one more step in the direction of requiring sort of a broker to be active in saying, I am responsible for these folks and the property management they do. I think our mechanism for enforcing would not change. We already have the ability to enforce that. And Mike, please speak up if I'm botching enforcement. But I think that's correct. So that was really more, from the Trek side, I'm not sure. I don't know that I fully digested what the use would be. There's probably an enforcement mechanism to it, but I think the idea was that active step on the part of the broker.
Okay, so as a follow-up, and before I let Brian finish up my thoughts, I think some progress is valuable. We need to move forward in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure, and you just told me, Vanessa, said, well, we don't know. I'll have to answer that. When that check mark is there, as you think about it from the Trek standpoint, what are you thinking the broker is telling Trek and the public when one of their agents has that mark checked, property management? Is there some process that you're requiring for them to do that? Because as brokers, we're already responsible for everything our agents do anyway. So I'm not sure. My concern is that the public or someone seeing that, or that agent seeing it, says, oh, I'm a property manager, I've been authorized by my broker, I can advertise. And someone will say, well, because that's on the Trek website, that must mean they have a certain level of expertise or education or something. And we certainly don't want to go, I wouldn't think we'd want to go down that road because that's not a process we've got in place.
No,
It won't be on the Trek
It
website.
won't be shown.
It won't be public facing. It'll be an internal list that Trek has from us as brokers that Yasmin and Bill in my company are the only two people who are designated to do property management. That would not be something that the public could go onto the Trek website to see who in my office is approved for property management. The public wouldn't even know.
So why does Trek have a list that shows who in my office I allowed to do property management? I don't understand the purpose of that.
The purpose would be just an increased accountability for that broker to be aware of what's going on in their business and who's doing what, and giving the nod that, hey, this person I feel is qualified to do property management. I have, just like we've talked about having in writing on the independent contractor agreement what property types and competencies people have, it would just be an endorsement of that competency.
Okay.
All right, Yasmin, you were next.
So yes, so again, we definitely, I think, need that, but I think the other big part that we're missing, and I was just going back to our notes, is when that gentleman, I forget his name, that came and actually brought up this issue. One of the big issues that he had or was expressing is the fact, what we just talked about, the consumers don't know. They don't know what the property management's responsibility truly is. They don't know who to go to when something goes wrong, or, and again, at the end of the day, what TREC is here to do is to protect the consumer. So I do think we need to add this check mark or designation, whatever we're calling it, for the broker to feel like a little more responsibility. But we're missing the big part of, like, how do we help the consumer? And going back to I was just looking at our IBS form. I mean, there's really nothing that talks about property management, and maybe it's a matter of a different form that is created for just property management. And I know we're probably going to go down a rabbit hole with that, but just where, when somebody's doing property management for a client, they get to have a specific form that says what their duties are for property management only, and that they get to sign it and where they can complain. I don't know, just an idea, but property management is just so different than even farm and ranch and just contracts in general. Contracts are contracts, we're done, we close them, we're done. This is an ongoing relationship that can be for years. A form that specifies what that responsibility is and what the rules are doesn't seem, too much to ask for or to give to our consumers.
Brian?
Yeah, I first of all, with regard to the check mark, I don't know why it would not be public facing. I thought it would be very similar to a delegated supervisor who has been designated by the broker to say, okay, this person, this agent is delegated as a supervisor, so that a member of the consumer could come on the website and say, who do I go to? Who's responsible? Who can I talk to about my problem? Oh, so-and-so is the delegated supervisor. I will talk to them if I can't get to the broker. So likewise, delegating or designating a property manager and have that public facing, utilizing the same system we already have on the TREC website, public facing. We have that for delegated supervisor. Now we have it for designated or delegated property manager. Would allow a member of the public to say, who do I talk to? Who do I go to solve my problem or ask my questions with regard to property management? And no, I don't think it's a solve all, but I think it's a step in the right direction. Yasmin, I think I agree with you. Maybe the IABS is not clear. Perhaps it's written more for sellers and purchasers of real estate than tenants and landlords, but perhaps that form could be improved without statutory change. It's been changed and updated over the years, and maybe there's some additional language that we could recommend that we could get done without requiring statutory change. I'm not sure if changing that form requires statutory approval or not, but I feel like it as a group, as a work group, we need to make progress. We need to push things forward, and even if it's baby steps, I think moving forward is appropriate. And therefore, I think this sort of deal with the check mark, making it public facing, is a step in the right direction for those complaints that TREC receives. Such a large percentage of them have to do with property management. So it's a small step, but I think it's important and appropriate.
Chance.
I mean, it seems like the property management agreement pretty much outlines the duties. It seems like we just need qualifications for the person performing those duties.
Right.
So I was about to bring that up and Holly, I have not forgotten you. On the topic of the IABS being changed, I just don't think that it makes sense, because we really are, when it comes to property management, dealing with statutorily 3 words. And so we're not gonna be able to do these minimum duties and all these other things, because really there are no minimum duties required by law when it comes to property management, other than the ones that are already on this information about brokerage services. The property management agreement, that promulgated form, which is not a TREC form, because they don't do representation agreements. It's a Texas Realtors form, but any other property management company that has an agreement is gonna have the scope of service laid out in that agreement. And so I think that really covers that. I think really the basis of the argument here is how do we keep unqualified people from practicing property management? Right? And how does the broker control or regulate or become aware of that in some cases? So Holly, you're up.
I was going to repeat the exact same thing you said, that the association documents cover that.
Right.
So they cover that agreement. And I am in agreement that I think a checkbox is necessary, whether it's forward facing or behind the scenes, so that we can track who is responsible and who has been authorized. I think that having that ability to track it and see it on the truck side is important.
And
Thank you.
I think that what we can do for those of us who do not authorize property management of any sort is for us to have a checkbox with TREC that says no one in my office is authorized to do property management. So check, nobody in my office should be doing property management, and it's in my policies and procedure manual. So if somebody from my office is doing it, they're doing it against everything that
Kind of covering us to say, hey, look, we're not allowing this at all.
Yep.
And we're just letting you know right up front.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see that being a bad idea either.
All right, so Yasmin and Brian, do y'all have things to say still or no? Okay, so can we all agree that when it comes to the original bullet points on this talking point, that number 1 and number 2 are essentially out the window?
Yes.
We don't need a new IABS and we don't need a separate license type.
Correct.
So the discussion that we're having really boils down to how does a broker, quote unquote, authorize, and what are the qualifications required of somebody who's going to do property management? And so the question becomes, is this a simple form that gets turned in that has, as broker, I certify that these people are allowed to do property management, or below, I certify that nobody can do property management, and we send that into TREC, and they store it away in a closet for one day when a complaint comes in? Or is there a added requirement of the people listed on that form to have to do some level of education?
Yes, I would say that the people on that form would need to do at minimum the property management course that we have through Texas Realtors, or any kind of education course specifically for property management.
I think we just have to designate a certain number of hours.
Yeah, 30 hours. Isn't it 30 hours?
The TREC property management class is, right?
Yeah.
But I think we still have to go back to the fact that you get a license today, you can be a property manager tomorrow without any experience. So education's all great, but there has to be some other component in there.
Yeah, I think that would be covered under 535.2.
Yeah. Because to do whatever,
The same thing we've been
Yeah.
talking about for 6 months.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just.
So
Mentor,
Mhm.
the first
Like
read.
mentor.
first 3, yeah. So, all right, lawyers, lawyer this.
I would love to. Okay, so as I'm hearing 2 things. I'm hearing the internal checkbox, send with the corresponding form. Sounds like you're talking about a form that would both say, these are the people, or no one is authorized.
Right, so basically 2 checkboxes.
What's the point of the no one is authorized?
CYA, for the broker who gets a complaint that one of their agents is doing property management.
Okay, that's a little harder for me to speak to, but.
They're the same thing. So right now, you could have a policy internally that says you can't do this,
Right.
right? And so then if an agent does this, and then a complaint is filed against, with TREC, we would then go look to see if there's a policy that says you can't do this, right?
Right.
So kind of a similar scenario, just a different, it doesn't seem like a different result.
It's pretty much the same thing, I guess, really. It's just kind of letting you know up front.
It's, yeah,
I mean, it really should save time, you'd think, without having even asked the question.
I mean, they're still gonna wanna see the policy.
Yeah, right, okay, but that's what we're,
Because you may have sent it in, on a form, but if that agent didn't know that it wasn't authorized, then
I
that's a
could
different
say, yeah.
story.
they're gonna, yeah,
Right.
they're gonna walk through
So,
the responsibility rule and what
I
they.
mean, that may be a wash at the end of the day, that part you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, the top one I'm seeing is the broker responsibility component, a click towards consumer protection. Okay, so I'm seeing a discussion about a form that we would require. I think that's likely going to require a rule change. Well, it would certainly require a rule to do that. I'm not quite certain where it gets in terms of statutory change. An education component, in chatting over here with Abby on the computer, sounds like we're starting to get more statutory. So if you're gonna require anyone who's on that list to have taken X amount of hours related to property management, I think we're trying to get more statutory. That doesn't stop a recommendation from going out today. So if you all want the recommendation to be, we think TREC needs a rule / statutory change to address this issue, a form that would do this, and this amount of education, or however you want to phrase that, you can make that recommendation. The commission would have to analyze it, look at it, see if it's what they want to do, and then the wheels can turn. If it's a rule, the rule would come back here. If it's statutory and they want to try now, I don't know.
Do you have to have a form, or can you have it on that online process that there's a check that you have to fill in?
Well, we don't know. I don't know the answer to that right now because the system doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I can't. Steve will come in here
I think
and
the-
remove me if I say yes, we can do it. But I would
think the
imagine we'd
motion
have to
would
build
have
it
to
with
be-
that.
Yeah, it seems like it could be so easy, because you're already accepting your agents and whatever else, and checkbox, yes, this person will be a property manager, no, we don't accept
Yeah,
it.
so we'd have to build it in
Yeah.
somehow.
I think the vehicle for now would be, or the motion for now would be a vehicle for
Yeah.
the registration of.
I don't anticipate a paper form
Right.
Right.
because Denise will cry.
Can I circle back real quick?
Yeah.
I have an idea. It may be a good one, maybe a bad one. You'll tell me, I'm sure.
Yes.
So here's the idea. So think about how we handle broker responsibility, right? And we say, okay, you want to renew, you want to be a supervisor, broker responsibility, you want to run a team, whatever, broker responsibility, right? Okay, now we change now we don't have to have a change of any sort except for maybe a rule change on the type of class you take, okay? Now broker responsibility, this is the idea. Broker responsibility, you have to take broker responsibility in order to renew for your broker's license, right? Okay, so you do that, and if you want to be a property manager, why don't we just change instead of elective? I mean, at least it'd be better than nothing. We could get it done pretty quickly, I would think. We change elective course to, if you want to do property management.
If you're designated as a property manager by your broker.
Yeah.
Then as part of your renewal, you're.
Can we
required
just
to
do it
take
that way? And now, look, it's not gonna be the beautiful 30-hour course that we all would love to see, but it might be a start to something better,
Okay.
and it might be, gonna do it.
Yeah.
Mr. Baker, tell Ty his ideas too.
Well, okay, and I'm trying to go in with this last thing that he pointed out, but Vanessa, and I know I kind of semi-asked this before and you semi-answered it, but I'm still not clear on the two parts of this thing. I mean, one, I like progress moving forward, getting somewhat turning the aircraft carrier, slow but sure kind of thing. I just don't understand the value at all for us having something internal with TREC. Is TREC want that? Is that something that, I mean, that's additional paperwork and form and all that stuff that we would send in to you. Is that something that TREC needs? I don't see it changing how to complaint, how we're going to be held responsible as a broker. You're responsible in any way. And if this is a loose cannon out there doing property management, you didn't know about it, you have to prove that there's no way you could have known about it. So I don't understand the purpose of us having this internally with Trek. I think it's just, help me with that.
Bob, I think you're raising a great point. From the Trek side, it is not needed for us to do our job. I
Good.
think and Mike has his hand up, and Mike, tell us everything you know about enforcement.
So we already asked the questions. If you have policies and procedures, and we make some determination if they kind of had some knowledge or not that this activity was going on. Yeah, in many cases, like they're doing something and they're doing it on the side gig, and even really good brokers. We have one recently that has really strict policies against it and does a good job, and agents can still keep that hidden away from them. They're not. I mean, these are independent contractors, remember, and they're not employees, so you don't have like direct control over them in certain aspects as well. So I don't know if a checkbox for me personally would make any difference if someone violated the License Act or commission rules, would make any difference on the punishment that we would issue. It may give a broker the better brokers they have, the policies that prevent this. If it becomes a problem where there's multiple complaints filed against them of this, reoccurring, then it will change our decision on, well, I don't think you're doing your job diligently enough to make sure these things don't reoccur. So.
Okay, so Vanessa, what you said and what Mike said helps me with the understanding there's no value in having this internally with Trek. So we do a check mark that's outward facing that people see. I don't think we've solved the problem of making sure that we understand what that means to the public and other agents. And when that broker has that check mark saying, yeah, so-and-so can do property management, we're going to do what was just recommended and have a course that if the broker has anybody doing property management, then they're required to go through some training like the broker responsibility course in their renewal period. I think if we're going to have that box or that check mark that's outward facing, I think we've got to look at the recommendation we're going to make about what that means to the public and to other realtors as you work through that. I would think we'd have to do that.
Okay, that's a separate topic of conversation, but it's a good one. So let's hold on that for just a second, Bob. Because to me, the check mark really then becomes more a function of if the box is checked, then you have to do this education when you read it, according to type. Yeah. So Bob or Brian, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think the check mark has any value if it's inward facing only. I think the value of the check mark is if it's public facing. It gives the consumer direction on who do I talk to. The second value, I think, is it raises the awareness on the part of the broker that says, okay, I'm delegating this person as property manager. Now it's I'm responsible. It's my responsibility to make sure that they're qualified to do such, much like we delegate an agent as a supervisor. And so I think it's very much the same. It has to be public facing. And I like Ty's comment, but I think education is step two. This is just one step. It's a small step, but it's a step in the right direction. It leads us to cooperation, coordination with ESAC on what type of education. So I don't know that it's not a solve all, but it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, sir. So I think the concern with it being public facing, and we all live in a world of realtors and Facebook, is that it would take about 4 seconds after a broker checked the box to say, look, I'm a Trek certified property manager.
Yeah.
Everybody look, everybody look.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
It's true.
Yeah.
we don't see it in delegated supervisor because there's nothing sexy about that.
But delegated supervisor, you can be tomorrow. Once you get your license, you can be delegated as supervisor tomorrow.
Well,
That's crazy too.
But when you check that box, then to renew, you have to take broker responsibility. So I think the same thing comes with the conversation of if there's going to be a box to check, then when you renew, you have to take a certain amount of property management related education.
And what's wrong if people advertise that they're property management on Facebook? I mean, if they're taking a class and they are designated to do it, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. I just don't want it being tied to the commission. I don't want it to look like it's an endorsement by the commission that you are somehow
Track
qualified
certified.
or certified to be a property manager. Unless, in order to check that box, you also have to have taken some education up front.
And I think it needs to go side by side. Like, why can't we make them take classes? If they're gonna practice this, they should take classes. Like, what's the big deal?
Yasmin, I think the idea is my thought process was if we just do it the same way we're doing a supervisor, it accomplishes at least somewhat of the goal.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the class is a great idea. I mean, they should take the classes or, have a little more knowledge if they're gonna do this. So it seems like just strengthening your suggestion just strengthens, just the box. It's a box in a class.
All right, so Abby, Vanessa,
Yes,
thoughts on how this fits with statute now versus,
it's gotta be statutory change to require that education. I mean, that's how broker responsibility is.
okay,
So it's statutory change, it'd be a new requirement. I think I've advised on this before in the sense of it starts to look a little bit like a sub-license, a license to do property management. I don't know if it would be contained within your required hours. And I don't ever speak really well to education, but like, would this course be just a part, you just have to make it part of your regular CE?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
so
Is it a
idea.
one-time, is it a one-time, is it a,
So we don't modify, so
every
here's the
time you
key,
do
I
it.
think, we don't modify the 18 hours, we leave the 18 hours as it is for your renewal. If you want to continue to be a supervisor, you take the 6-hour broker responsibility. If you want to be a property manager, we modify the elective piece in there.
just like contracts.
Yeah, just like contracts.
A certain number of your hours have to be
That's the idea.
property management related.
That way, at least you can get a crash course
Every
on.
2 years.
I
so
mean-
I think that's a recommendation you could make to ESAC. They're the ones that have the, do the standards and have the expertise in that. But like I said, I'm happy to take the recommendation to do what you want me to do with it. If you want, there's the option of Chance taking a recommendation to the November meeting, of what it sounds like you wanna do, and the commission could ask us to explore those options. We could put it on, if the commission wants us to put it on their workshop for the next, it wouldn't be November, it'd be January workshop. I think these are significant enough changes that probably there's a workshop component to it, just to make sure everyone knows. And when I say workshop, I mean commission workshop,
Right.
so everyone knows. But I think there's some statutory changes in there. If you guys want to vote to move forward with the recommendation today, I'm happy to work with Chance on that presentation, what it would look like and the options. I think if you guys can get the substance of what you want out here, some of these, I don't know what I think you guys know the pros and the cons and the potential pitfalls and everything. So in some ways it's like, all right, what do you guys want to do? Do you feel ready to make a recommendation?
Mr. Baker?
Okay, so I hear you're going to clarify the motion, but to Ty's point he made earlier, which was a good one, remember, if you have to take the broker responsibility course, that plus legal 1 and 2 and the 3 hours contract, you're already at 17 hours.
That's right.
That's right.
So if you're going to add another course or whatever, and stay with that 18, it's just going to be a 1 hour course. Otherwise, you're going to be upping the 18 hours as you work through. So, but are you going to go ahead and clarify the motion we're talking about, how we're going to move forward? 'Cause I'm not sure I'm yet totally on board with what we're going to recommend.
I'm not sure we know what we're gonna recommend.
We're good. We're on the same page. I'm good. We're good.
All right, Brian?
Yeah, Bob, however, broker responsibility is not required of an agent. only of a delegated supervisor or a broker or supervising broker. So there is room in that CE for coursework for a property manager because they're not required to take the broker responsibility course.
But if they are,
So
it could be required.
Brian, do you think it changed in your mind? Let's just say we have somebody that works with us and they're a supervisor and they're a property manager. Would that be an issue for renewal to put us over the 18 hours? It could be an issue, I think.
Yeah, I think we're creating requirements,
Uh,
additional education requirements to be a property manager.
mhm.
in my mind, I see that as step 2. You know, I think step 1 is, hey, here's me as a broker, I'm delegating this person to be property manager. Step 2 then is to continue to be a property manager. In my 2-year license period, I'm required to take a property manager course, much like a delegated supervisor is required to take broker responsibility.
What do you think about this, Brian? Since you're talking right now, I'll ask the question. Instead of making a requirement or a rule, what if right now, initially we say, okay, checkbox, and then we say, we recommend continuing education of, however many hours for a property manager.
I think that I like that. So you're suggesting we make a motion that say we require a broker to delegate or designate the property manager or property managers within their brokerage, and we recommend then that a rule change or whatever sort of change for additional CE education for those people delegated as property managers. Is that what I'm hearing, Ty?
It could be one of those things, or we could just say we recommend that if you designate someone as a property manager, we would recommend you have other education requirements as a broker for that person to complete. Not saying it's a rule, it's just a recommendation. Since right now we have to change the whole can of worms.
It feels like we really,
because right now we have recommendations.
We're watering down our recommendation. As a work group, we're watering down our recommendations because of the difficulty of statutory changes versus rule changes and versus technology requirements. And so it's I think making it a recommendation and raising the bar and challenges to say, okay, let's move forward on getting these sorts of things done with whatever type of work it requires, whether it's technology or whether it's rule change or whether it's a recommended statutory change. Let's move these things forward and not be as concerned about, well, gosh, we can't do that because of such and such.
Right,
I agree.
that's the idea.
That's where the workshop can come in.
Right, because we're not, with this motion, we wouldn't be trying to state a rule or state anything else. We're just recommending to the commission that they put their thinking caps on and they make the rule.
So that recommendation could go in November. And the likely result would be to have the discussion on that recommendation at the next commission workshop in February. I don't know why, January's committee is February.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so just to recap here, we're making a recommendation to the commission that some vehicle of registering agents doing property management be made available, and that upon registering somebody as an agent participating in property management, there is an educational component required.
Yes.
And a reminder, they have to be overseen.
Mr. Roth?
That's a great idea. Oh,
you're muted, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to be the gadfly here, but I think we're really headed the wrong direction here. We're trying to, I don't understand what problem we're solving here. property management is a diverse, complicated business. It's got a lot of moving parts. And in commercial, if you start trying to mix commercial with residential, with what are we trying to save the consumer from? And what are we trying to impose on a broker the responsibility on? This is their business model. The broker is, if they're offering out property management as part of their business products, there's a lot of trade organizations that are already enhancing education, providing designations, promoting education, that are really trying to manage, at least in the commercial side. And I'm assuming that on the residential side, also TAR has groups that property management groups. There's independent property management groups within organizations. They have good education and best practices. I think, again, I don't know that this is a regulatory issue that TREC should be dealing with. If we want to have a co-op with the trade organizations, with property management groups, to see if this is an issue that they would like to develop other programs that TREC could maybe endorse programs to enhance property management skills. That's one thing, but to impose additional requirements on brokers to designate people and qualify people and we're not running their businesses. They're running their businesses. If they don't hire the right people to do things, they're going to get tagged. If there's if there's complaints, then they're going to get penalized by the enforcement of the rules that are already in existence. I don't understand what we're imposing. We're on a very slippery slope, I think, of creating the idea of additional education, additional designation, and then potentially licensing. And I think that's going to be a very difficult thing. If we want to promote something to the commission, we can say, maybe they should try to see if there's some other identification or promotion to encourage brokers to enhance their education for property managers within the residential, commercial, depending on what their business is. But I absolutely would not recommend that we promote this as a regulatory or a new rules or an additional recommendation or requirement on anybody. I don't think it's smart, and I think if we recommend it to the commission, we're not giving them a problem to identify, and we're not giving them any potential solutions to that problem. And I think it's misguided for us to make that kind of a recommendation.
Bill, can I ask you an honest question? What's wrong with identifying people to be property managers?
You tell me, what is a property manager? What is a property manager?
Someone that handles rents and collects rents and brings in people to fix issues and problems and things of that nature. Evict people. I mean, you can put it all in one big old scope of.
You can't see what and again, I'm not arguing with you. What I'm really trying to say is the scope of work is different in all kinds of different groups. If you're just collecting rents, what do you need to have? What's the big requirement to have a big designation? If you're managing complicated properties, if you're producing skill sets of supervising construction, you're handling there's different skill levels involved, and so it's not a one size fits all situation here.
But
I really think it's up to the broker who's supervising their folks. That's their business. I don't think it's up to us to tell the broker to supervise them. It's already in the statute. If the broker's not collecting rents right, then he's going to get tagged. We don't have to do anything more. I don't believe. And again, maybe I'm too naive on this.
I just don't see why somebody would designate somebody that they don't feel competent is to perform that task. And what's wrong with identifying that person to be that individual to perform that task that you've delegated them to do. My point is, it doesn't affect you as a broker, it affects you as a consumer, and identifying that person as such, I don't see anything wrong with it. If you feel like they are capable of doing it, then go right ahead. But you're the broker, you're responsible for them, and I don't really see what the issue is on identifying a person that you feel is competent. And if you're like an uninvolved broker, then I can see it being a big issue. And I don't see what the problem with identifying somebody as a supervisor or a property manager or a agent or a broker is. I don't really see the issue, and it's,
Well, my issue, we do have a problem because we have license complaints to back up that problem.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Yep.
And so.
And we're not trying to do a blanket over everything, right?
Ensuring to the consumer that.
Who do I designate in my company? We manage 900,000 square feet of properties. We have 400 tenants. We have 35 properties around the town. Who do I designate as the property manager when I got 5 property managers? Rents come into my company. Rents come. No. Just a second. Why do the company? I'm the broker. I'm the company. I'm responsible. I don't have to tell who's working in my company, who's collecting the rents, who's talking to the tenants, who's going out there and fixing the roof. That's not, the public doesn't have to. My name is on the license. My name is on the company name. I'm the guy who's responsible. I don't need Trek to tell me. The public already knows if there's a problem with my property, they're going to come to me. They're going to deal with me or my agents. And so again, I don't need to impose additional requirements on me or on my agents. If I hire irresponsible, uneducated, unknowledgeable, people aren't going to do that, it's shame on me, and I'm going to get sued and I'm going to get tagged. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hire people. I'm going to train them. I'm going to do it. But I don't need Trek. I don't need a law to tell me to do that. We already have the law that says that's my responsibility as the broker for these folks. And to impose additional responsibilities on things that I've already got the responsibility to do, I think is number one, is not necessary. I think it's something that's duplicitous, and I think it just layers on more things that makes it more difficult for us to do our business as responsible people in the community. And the last thing is, I'm not really sure this is a big problem. And again, I don't know, I don't understand the numbers.
Hello, here we
And-
are. Yeah, so,
I'm sorry?
No.
Somebody's in the background, I guess. Not in my place. Anyway, listen, whatever the group wants to do, but I don't think this is a fight that we got to put a dog into.
Well, I think the majority of, and I could be wrong, so enforcement tell me, we have a lot of problems with complaints on property management, and there's a lot of people out there doing property management who are not qualified to do property management. And if you have 10 people in your office, Bill, and only 5 of them are the people that you have designated as property managers, then on your list, you would have 5 people. It's not just one person, it's whoever in your office you have deemed is capable of doing property management. And if the other 5 people in your office specialize in whatever they specialize in, they do know management, then their name wouldn't be on your list. You would have, of your 10 people, 5 would be on the list to track for property management, the other 5 would not.
Maybe you can help Soccer clarify for me, what are all the complaints that we're getting about property management? People
Well, we'll
not,
have Mike Malloy do that since he's on the
Michael,
call.
yeah, because we get a
what?
lot.
I mean, is it people are not,
Let's answer that question. Mike?
Well, statistically, I mean, our complaints in that area have gone down. I brought that data, I guess, it's probably been about a year ago at this point. But I mean, last time, if I recall, off the top of my head, I mean, misappropriation, it's it's around 2%. But these are allegations of that stuff. It's not stuff that, I mean, you want to have statistics that revolve into actually formal disciplinary action that relates to that stuff. And then the remaining statistics, I think it was around 7%, 7 or 8% of complaints may have allegations that deal with property management and leasing issues. It's gone down. We don't see as much as we do. We see a lot of other, negligent type of activity. But like with any cycles of any kind of real estate, that can change overnight. When people start leasing their houses out more because they can't sell them, things like that. But there has been a downward trend from what it was when we started tracking this, I think about 7 years ago or so.
It's gonna go back up because people can't sell it now.
That was the original fear, I think, that when Lee Warren brought this to this group was
But
that
Lee-
as the market slows, we would
Yeah, and Lee was brought up an example of one individual. So a lot of these statistical bumps in some of the roads that we have are against one person that may get 12 complaints filed against them. So that can statistically skew some of the data. I mean, the individual that he had to deal with, she had 42 complaints filed against her. So that can change the statistics in 1 year significantly. And I mean, I spoke in Fort Worth about a month ago about property management, and a lot of people that attend those things, they're doing a good job. It's people that do this stuff as a side gig that I'm not sure that get the education or may even will ever get the education. That's my concern, where some of this stuff just pops up for the people that do this stuff. May not be able to catch those people in the net with a checkbox or additional stuff, unless it's just are directly mandatory to take a property management course, regardless if you're going to do it or not.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, appreciate it. So, do we want to make this recommendation or no? Is the real question here.
Yeah.
I think we should.
And just have the commission look at it. If they deem that it's not necessary, then okay.
Put it to a vote.
Yeah, you're gonna have to. So, do you want to say what it was? I wrote some notes for you if you can read my writing.
So the motion would be to recommend to the commission that they look into the possibility of a vehicle to register agents where a broker would register agents in their brokerage authorized to perform property management, and whether or not there needs to be an education component tied to that registration. I would entertain a motion as such.
I'll second it, or I'll put the motion in place.
There is a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second from Brian.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. I don't know that we can have any more discussion on this.
No.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Do you want to do a roll call or do you want to?
Let's just, if we need it, we will. So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Motion passes. And on that note, we are going to take a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Janice.
All right, we're back. So, moving on in our agenda to point 5 is a discussion. If you remember in our last meeting, we talked about bringing back some of the materials from the previous broker responsibility work groups related to a differentiation between types of broker. And specifically, we were talking about, are you a broker? Are you a sponsoring broker? What does that look like? Are you the designated broker? Are you broker associate? And all of those different definitions. So this is a giant topic, which I do not think we're going to come to a conclusion in today's meeting on. But I think that it makes sense for us to get some direction on where we want to go with this, so that we can get whatever we need to get to dive a little deeper into it at our next meeting. So, in your meeting materials, you will notice that there are some recommendations from past groups. Bob, I was going to let you kind of take the lead on the discussion on this if you want, considering that you were part of that group and none of us were.
Okay, thank you. The primary thing that I want to make sure I understand, if there's a consensus on this group, our whole discussion revolved around the concept that we felt like there was a major difference between someone who has a broker's license and someone who's a sponsoring broker. And so everything we were talking about says, if, just like we said, you get a license today, you're a property manager tomorrow. You get a license today, you can open up a company with 100 agents tomorrow. And we said, that's just wrong. And so we've got to have some process, and we got some recommendations, some things in there. But the concept was there needs to be something that TREC requires, that if you're going to be responsible for someone else, and we've already got the thing as a broker responsible for the training, education, so forth. But if you're going to do that, if you're right now, all you are is a broker, I don't mean that to be minimizing the value of a broker, but if that's what you are and you want to now be responsible agents, you got to do something. And so the question becomes, and we had a lengthy discussion about this with no real consensus on where it goes. We had some recommendations that we actually, as I remember, sent forward to TREC at the same time the Sunset Commission was hot and heavy on TREC's, back door. So pretty much everything else got sidelined. But I just want to be sure that from the consensus of this group, that we support the idea that if you're going to be a sponsoring broker, that's different than just having a broker's license. So that's my first question of the group, because depending on the answer to that, that'll help us decide how we move forward.
Does everybody agree that a sponsoring broker differs from an individual broker from a responsibility standpoint?
Yes.
Anybody disagree with that notion?
And then my question is, because I read through this, as a sponsoring broker, in order to become a sponsoring broker, you have to take broker responsibility, correct? So you take that first and then you sponsor other agents. So are we now saying that there needs to be another level to the broker responsibility?
Maybe.
I.e. mentoring with an already broker.
Which I don't think is realistic.
That's not realistic, because nobody's gonna take I'm sorry, but I don't think that there are gonna be brokers out there for another broker to come and shadow their business and see their business, because everybody thinks, oh, we're competing, so, and unless there's somebody who, so I think we already have the education requirement.
So Bob, I think that everybody is on the same page, that yes, there's
Okay.
there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, so to Saka's points here, one of our challenges was the timing. If you're going to have this additional requirement, are you going to do it within the renewal period? Or are you going to say before you actually take that next step and start sponsoring people, you have to have gone through a certain level of additional education, additional requirements? And we talked around, you see some of them there of what we're talking about on the courses and what you would require. But it became a timing issue. And as you see in your information, we talk about the mentoring. I will tell you that as I remember it, the consensus of most of the group, while valuable, mentoring is one of the hardest things we can do. Setting up mentors, qualifying mentors, what you have to go through the process to be someone who can qualify to be a mentor. That if someone wants to become a sponsoring broker, here's a process that they go through, and they've got to go through it before they actually sponsor a broker. saying that you've got to do it sometime in your renewal period, the person could actually have, been a sponsor, sponsoring people for almost 2 years before they finally have to take some courses. So we have 2 years of potential disaster because they haven't had anything that holds them accountable. So we had a real timing issue. And so I'm optimistic that this group, with their different sets of experiences and frankly, different leadership here, not just from our chair and so forth, but different leadership at Trek as we look at this, because Trek is involved. Trek is going to be involved as they go through the process of approving mentors and approving courses. I'm optimistic that we can say, okay, here's a new way to look at this. Here's a new way to think about it to solve the problems of the timing of the additional requirements. Are we going to be able to put together a mentoring program? Here's the qualification where we have the ability to have people around the state who come forward and say, yeah, I'd like to be a mentor, and here's what I have to go through to qualify to be one. Those are questions that I really look forward to this particular group to be able to answer some of those questions that we frankly struggled with.
Hold that thought for a second, if you don't mind. Can I ask staff a question here? Do we have any kind of global perspective on this from Orello or anyone else? I know that, in lots of states, everybody's a broker, but then you have to be a sponsoring or designated or delegated or whatever broker, depending on the state. Is there any perspective on individual broker versus sponsoring broker, differing requirements for licensure or anything like that?
No, of any, but we could dig in and see what we could find. I think the states really vary in terms of what they require and why. I find that many of them look to us to see what we do. Many of them seem overly complicated, but I would need to, I mean, that's just anecdotally.
Okay. I need to understand, because I think we might be confused, maybe I'm confused. If I have, say I become a broker today, before I can sponsor people, I have to then take broker responsibility, correct? Or do I have to wait the 2 years?
You have to take it to renew.
It's not
Okay.
before you sponsor.
I think that's the problem then. So if you get your broker's license today and you want to sponsor people, I think the rule should be you should take broker responsibility before you're allowed to sponsor people. And then that would solve it, the education. And what Bob is saying, that 2-year gap. So say I get my broker's license today and my renewal is today. Right now, as it stands, I could decide I want to sponsor everybody in this room, and I haven't been required to take broker responsibility yet. But if I get my broker's license today and my renewal is today, and then tomorrow I decide that I want to sponsor everybody in this room, then I would have to be required to take broker responsibility. If we make that change, then that would give the education.
There's been several discussions that everyone should take broker responsibility.
I think everybody should.
I think they should.
So Denise, how does this screw up your life?
Oh, I mean, it does, and we can work around anything. I think Vanessa touched earlier on, we're getting closer to a new system, and so,
It becomes easier for us to customize.
well, just
Potentially.
so that the information is that we would be requesting a customization on a system that we haven't implemented yet. So part of that process is pull over what we've got now, and then after we're going to customize, which, it doesn't mess it up for us. It's the questions we'll have are, okay, do we want to modify? We want to track it, flag it somehow. Okay, now do you want other requirements triggered on it? Do you want to prevent renewal if this isn't met? Those are just conversations we need to have at that point.
So one of the concepts of the timing of education was that we wanted to make people aware, people who were brokers or are thinking about becoming a broker and a sponsoring broker, that's an important distinction. that if you're going to sponsor people, you're at a different level. And we understand we've got 535.2, we've got all the rules and set up, but we wanted the people to have an awareness. This is a significant new world you're about to step into. It's not just a money deal. It's not just if you go out and sponsor 10 people and have them pay you $100 a month, well, that's a nice little extra income. There's a responsibility that goes with it. And so the feeling was, for the most part, before you take that next step and become a sponsoring broker, you have to have done something. Whatever we decide that might be, you have to have done something. It's not an after the fact thing. You need to be aware this is a new level of responsibility that you're about to enter into. And this course or this whatever it is you're required to do is an indication that's the case. And if this is too inconvenient, too much of a problem for you, then guess what? Don't become a sponsoring broker. Don't do that. And we were really trying to accomplish that. So as Dr. points out, as we go through the process, the timing of this becomes pretty important. And we're just trying to say, before you do this, you need to know. And the broker responsibility course itself, and as we keep hearing, and Chase talks to other people, talk to us about how much different it is and how things, it may in fact be a course that could really lend itself to helping someone who's about to become a sponsoring broker understand that new world they're about to enter into. And if it's as good as what we keep hearing about, it could be as simple as the starting point could be before you become a sponsoring broker, you need to have gone to that course before you do it, not sometime during your renewal period, but before you take that next step, which is obviously going to require something at the TREC level that in order for you to be a sponsoring broker, go through the process, there's something. And Vanessa, I don't know from the TREC standpoint what's involved with that. We really didn't have that conversation, as I recall, because at some point in time, there's got to be something that enforces that, just like you do now within the renewal period. You can't renew your license if you're a delegated supervisor until you've taken the broker responsibility course. Same thing here. You can't be a sponsoring broker until you've done whatever. I see Ty doing his hands like, what? What is he talking about?
No, Bob, I love your idea, and actually you just gave me an idea. I'm full of great ideas, right, guys? So here's the idea. When you get your broker's license, you need to have taken brokerage within the last 2 years. Am I correct? Yes. So yes, you need to have brokerage in there. Well, we could do two ways. We could have ESEC modify the brokerage class and include a component for sponsoring people, maybe.
They've kind of done.
Right. It's a little bit in there.
Visited that court. Well, it's going to get presented at the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot more focused on like the broker agent
relationship. I see. So that would be a good way to look at it. And then the next thing is, what if we just said a rule change or a requirement change, maybe, instead of just saying, hey, part of your X amount of hours, you need to be a broker, one of them needs to be broker responsibility.
So it's in statute.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's a designated broker for a business entity or a broker who sponsors a sales agent or a license holder who supervises another license holder must attend during the term of the current license at least 6 classroom hours of broker responsibility.
Can we modify it and say prior to getting or prior to receiving broker license upgrade?
That's what that current.
That's what that.
It says it?
Yeah.
Not prior.
Well,
No,
not prior
to.
to, but if you're gonna be the designated broker, if you're gonna sponsor, or if you're gonna supervise, you've gotta take the course during
In
the
your
term of
current
the
renewal.
current license.
Right. The problem is though, this is what Bob's
Bob
talking
is
about.
saying.
Bob is talking about
Totally,
you
I
already
get that.
yeah,
I'm just telling you, you
That's
have
in
to
there.
change statute,
I see.
because statute actually dictates it, it's
Dictates
not a
it.
rule.
I see.
I'm not,
the
that's
other-
not impossible, but
No,
I think
certainly
that's just
not.
for
But the
them.
other issue there to me would be,
It's
Trying
easy
to-
to get the class.
so it's super easy to get the
It's
class,
easy,
yeah,
yeah.
it's not a problem with that. My thought process is, it almost leads you to think that it's a different type of license. That you have an individual broker's license and you have a sponsoring broker's license if you have to do something before something else. Because if I'm an individual broker and I'm just hanging out and I've been an individual broker for 5 years, and then all of a sudden my spouse decides to get their license and I'm gonna sponsor them, now I fall under this and I need this class, but if we're talking about more, before I could do that, who the heck is gonna regulate that?
Well, here's the, okay, maybe
That's
we
number one.
handle
It's
it.
easy to do that.
Maybe we say, look, just in general for a broker's license. Instead of,
I mean, I think you'd have to.
yeah, I think you just call it if you're gonna get your broker's license, make sure you have broker responsibility prior to putting in your application for,
I think that's easy.
Your broker's
I think that's an
license.
easier fix than.
I think just making that a requirement for one of the classes you take.
But say it again.
So basically, we just,
Before you can test. you have
yeah,
to
before you
have
test,
broker responsibility.
you have to have broker responsibility, and that solves all the issue. That just cleans it up and you're done.
Why don't we just go back and do broker responsibility for all, and it cleans up a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it shows what you should expect out of your broker and what your broker should expect out of you.
I'm gonna let you and the people on the wall talk about that.
We've talked, I mean, it's come up
I think it's a
several
good
times.
idea.
Yasmin?
That's what I was thinking when you guys were talking about this class. I thought we were talking about broker's responsibility. So I agree that that's the class that we just make mandatory up front. And since I'm here, I really don't like the whole sponsor or mentorship from another broker. That's like you just said, what if somebody just wants to add their spouse and other brokerages are just, I mean, that just seems ridiculous. As a broker, we're already having to have so many so many transactions under our belt. So that should give us the knowledge of what our sponsorees are going to need from us, not have to go to another brokerage to get training. That's just a nightmare.
So
That's-
let me ask you this, Yasmin, do you feel like basically if we just said, we recommend to have all potential new brokers, or applicants, that part of their application would need to be, one of the requirements would be to have broker responsibility completed?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's simple, and I agree with you 100%. I don't see how in the world we could do a mentorship. I like the idea somewhat, and then the other side of me says, oh my gosh, what a pain. So yeah.
Yeah, and our task from the legislature is to not make it more
Barriers to
onerous for
entry.
people, yeah,
Mhm.
barriers to entry. So I get my broker's license and then I can't be a broker until I go through a mentorship program, and then all of the mentors in my area are busy and they can't take me on, and it just becomes on and on and on.
Can I make a suggestion on this topic real quick? The low-hanging fruit here seems to be the requirement to take broker responsibility prior to testing for a broker's license. That seems to be the low-hanging fruit, the easy, let's get this and knock it out real simple, right? But I do think that it merits more discussion and maybe a little bit more research. What if we took a recommendation, we're kind of up against it, if we're gonna make a statutory change, like we have to present this to the commission in the next meeting. Otherwise, we'll already be in legislative session after that.
We're already real close.
Yeah, we're up against a deadline-ish, not a hard and fast deadline, but we're up against it. So what if we took a recommendation, and we can vote on this in a second, but what if we took a recommendation to the commission for requiring broker responsibility prior to taking the licensure test for a broker? And then come back in January and discuss more in depth if there's anything additional that we need to add to that over time.
I think that's
Brian?
fair.
Thank you. I think it's a great recommendation, Chance, and it would be in the handout to be a licensed independent broker. Point number 2 is 300 additional education hours and qualifying it and continuing education to include broker responsibility. So I totally agree that it's low hanging fruit, and it makes a simple change in that recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Baker?
Consider a simple change is that rather than prior broker, making that broker responsibility course, just making the broker responsibility course prior to becoming a sponsoring broker,
That's the hard part.
rather than doing it that first, because not everybody, I mean, I have agents on a regular basis who want to be a broker, but they don't ever gonna have their own company. So we just say, here's the group we're talking about, that before you become a sponsoring broker, you've got to take this course. And that lets you know that there is something about being a sponsoring broker that's different. So rather than at the very beginning before you take your test and everything, I think you get a broker's license or whatever you're going to do, but before you become a sponsoring broker, you have to take that course. Maybe that'd be an easier thing, wouldn't be so much of a big rule change. Frankly, this is a little bit like anytime I've got an agent doing the first type of transaction and they've got to have help. Well, anytime before you become a sponsoring broker, here's what you've got to do. Take that course.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that change perhaps in a recommendation.
That, but trying to figure out how to do that part.
Well, we already have it in statute.
It's in statute that, yeah, it's in statute that you have
In
to
that
take it within your renewal period.
I don't know that
But
we
what
get it
he's
in.
talking about is before.
Yeah, he's talking about carving out for
Actually-
one, right?
He's basically what Bob's talking about right now. The problem with the scenario is, Bob, from what I can tell, just my personal opinion, is that we kind of create a separate license almost, unless we just make it a requirement for all brokers, no matter what. It just keeps it clean cut. And really, what's the harm in having a broker take broker responsibility in the first place before they're even licensed, rather than just waiting till after they're licensed and then they take it? It's kind of like, hey, we're setting you up for success. Go ahead and take broker responsibility now. And now go out there and grab you some agents,
Right,
you know?
or not,
Or not.
whichever one you
And
decide.
honestly, it might scare people out of wanting to sponsor anybody. I mean, if you're
Would not
smart,
be a
you probably
consideration.
wouldn't be scared of it, you know? But just, that's my thought. I think we do this, and then can we throw this in there too? I really think it's a valid point to say, hey, look, we recommend for all brokers applying to be, or all potential brokers applying for their broker's license upgrade. And then also, can we just go ahead and say, is there a way to put it out there and have a second motion to say, can we recommend all agents take broker responsibility? Keep it two separate motions? Is that a problem? So that way it's not all included in one
So
recommendation?
one does, they both done, you know.
Right, so separate them. Is that a bad thing?
That's fine, you can.
I think there's two separate issues, Ty. One is totally focused on a broker and their ability or their proficiency or their education to sponsor other agents. Requiring agents to take broker responsibility course is a totally separate issue, and I think we should address it separately.
That's my idea. That's what I'm saying, is basically have one motion for requiring, for a broker license upgrade, and then the next would be asking for a motion to have it where all license holders take broker responsibility.
Would it not go the other way?
Well, I don't want to lose
Yeah, I
one.
think you're
So,
right. Just
like,
do
can I-
the other
can
one
I
first
interject
and see
here?
if people.
I'm not
Oh,
100% sure that
And
it's
then
this
if it
group's
doesn't, then
response.
go to the,
I don't think it's this group's directive to make that recommendation. I think if we could kick it to ESAC and say, hey, if y'all want to make a recommendation, because that's really their job, is if everybody has to take a class.
We missed their
Vanessa,
meeting.
this got brought up in meeting, or in the commission meeting, and they said, just for brokers, can a commissioner say, can we just do it for all, and just kind of,
I think that conversation could have happened, like from the legislative side, yeah. I'm trying to think about whether it would fit into the legislative update component of the, workshop, you know, hashing out that. I think so. I don't know.
so Chance brings this up in meeting, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so if he
I'm trying to
comes
say
in
that.
and says, you know, hey, the recommendation of the group is to look
My
into
response to that would
statutory
be like,
change.
whatever y'all want to do.
Well, right, and so then I think the commission can consider that and make the recommendation. I'm thinking you would probably make that recommendation when we're looking at the legislative session stuff. But yes, I think you can make that comment of,
Okay.
you know, there's been discussion back and forth. about whether it should apply to all came up at BRWG. They didn't speak to that, thinking it was a little bit outside their purview.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay. So who has their hand up still?
I do.
Go for it.
One of the things that, if we just have this requirement in order to be a broker, you don't make the distinction. Somebody gets their broker's license for whatever reason, and then a month later, 6 months later, a year later, whatever, they decide to be a sponsoring broker. They don't have anything that's emphasized to them. This is a different world. And I think the timing of the requirement of that course is an important element in letting someone know, hey, you know, if you want to be a sponsoring broker other than just a broker, there's an additional thing you have to do, and here it is, whatever it might be. I'm a fan of, let's say, some recommendation to the commissioners, and then in our next meeting, we can work through whatever response we get from them. But I think the concept that we had talked before in our group is we want to have some way of getting the word to whoever's considering being a sponsoring broker to understand this is unique and special and different, and you need to understand that. And so setting the timing of whatever the requirement is, whatever it might be, to when they make that decision and they're going to become a sponsoring broker, and that TREC says, okay, here's a requirement now for you to become a sponsoring broker and be able to put agents under your license. Here's what you have to do. And I want us to see some way, shape, or form to accomplish that.
So Bob, I don't disagree with you. My question would be, what is the mechanism for doing that? Because, you know, if I'm individual broker and I want to sponsor Yasmin, and I've not taken broker responsibility or whatever that requirement is, and I go into my licensed services, there's nothing that's going to stop me from sponsoring Yasmin as it currently stands. And unless there was a if this then that sort of script in the new software that said, okay, well, you don't have broker responsibility, you can't accept that sponsorship.
That's what I think we should do.
And I think that's, you know, obviously not a today discussion because we don't have the technical capability to do that.
Or just bypass it and just make them take.
Everybody take it in order to get your broker's license. I think
Right, I get
that's
it.
the easiest.
But let's say
way.
that you got your broker's license 10 years ago,
Okay,
or let's say you get your broker's license today,
uh-huh.
and you take broker responsibility.
But you have to
Right.
take it every
And then you're
renewal.
not going to,
You have to
Yeah,
take it
that's
every
true.
renewal.
Yeah, so it solves the
So
issue.
it solves
Does
it.
solve the issue.
Yeah.
This is why I was like, is the easiest way to do it, just require for your broker license upgrade and it's done. Because they're gonna have to, it's an easy change too, because it's already in the requirements for your renewal. I mean, it's theoretically, it's an easy change.
Well, it's a statutory change, right? Let's take it like at the real
Yes.
base level. I'm not gonna talk about everybody. I think that's a different conversation, and I think we have the other
That's
stuff.
cool.
So, okay, we're just talking, and I'm not gonna differentiate between types of brokers.
Right.
But if you wanted to make it a requirement for all brokers,
Uh-huh.
then it would be a statutory change. But there's a statute in place that would need to be tinkered with.
Uh-huh.
To fit that, and so I think that's for it to be like prior, and I think Denise has got
prior to application, not prior to
application
testing.
or
Right.
how.
Right, because I think earlier conversations were saying require it to be able to test. That's
It's
trickier
harder, yeah.
to implement, so it would be cleaner from a licensing perspective
I
to
think
say,
Keep it
here's what you
easy.
need to get licensed, instead of making it,
Mhm.
okay, well, you need these courses, now we'll clear you, having that additional step, it complicates.
It creates a lot more back and forth.
Yeah,
And
you just
I
make
agree,
that
you
part
just
of the
make it-
education
yes.
requirements.
Because
Yes.
what's wrong with it? We're already
There's
requiring
nothing
it.
wrong
It's a
with it. I think
simple and
it's
easy
great.
thing.
Bill?
I did a couple things, maybe a point of just clarification, and maybe I missed it in all the discussion. What problem are we really trying to solve here, number one? And then number two, and I really need some clarification on that. I'm not clear as to what the problem we're trying to solve. The second thing is that We just spent 2 years revamping all the requirements and going through all the requirements to get your broker's license. And now we're talking about adding another level of required, another course and another several hours to do something. You're shaking your head. You're talking about doing it prior to being able to do something. We've already got a broker's license, but now you're saying let's take this responsibility course beforehand, possibly, to impose it on a different path.
The broker responsibility course.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you. I didn't hear you.
I said, what we're trying to say is all brokers need to take the broker responsibility course, end of story, whether they are individual brokers or sponsoring brokers, so that if an individual broker decided to become a sponsoring broker, they've already taken the broker responsibility, and every time they renew their license, they have to take the broker responsibility. So at any time during being an individual broker, if I was working with Bob and I decided I'm an individual broker, but I've already taken broker responsibility, every 2 years, 6 years down the road, I decide I want my own company, I leave, but I've already taken broker responsibility, so I know what it means to be a broker because I've already every single time taken
Okay,
it.
you're just moving a timeline.
Yeah.
Right, so Bill, the problem that we're trying to solve here is that if somebody is going to become a sponsoring broker, they need to understand the requirements of 535.2, which is the purpose of the broker responsibility course. Current statute simply says that a broker has to take broker responsibility course in their renewal. And all we're saying is let's move that timeline forward to application to take the broker's license. So the requirement's not changing, no new class, it's really just pushing it prior to taking the broker's license.
So that means that you have to have an extra course prior to taking your broker's license, right? So that's extra hours, right?
Technically, it's not extra hours. Technically, you just modify the courses you do take instead of taking maybe an elective course to get you to your 900 hours.
So it's now I'm gonna go back. Are we saying every broker is going to have to take it?
Anybody
Every
going from a licensed sales agent to a broker
Upgrade.
would be applying for a broker's license.
So that is a change, right? That's a.
Yeah, but it's the simplest change because it's already required for renewal.
It's only required for renewal if you sponsor agents or the designated broker of a business entity that sponsors agents or have been.
But there are other elements of 535.2 that aren't just for sponsorship that somebody who's going to be a broker should know anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like responding to people in 2 days.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, thank you.
Bob?
Okay, and I'm really trying to work through being able to have some recommendation move forward because of the timeline we're dealing with. And I think you need to make it clear if you're going to have this prior to obtaining a broker's license, that you include all brokers, regardless of whether they're currently sponsored, but all brokers have to take this course. We still, in my opinion, have not accomplished one of our primary objectives, and that's to make a clear distinction, because to Saker's point, you could get your broker's license and you had a broker's license through 2 or 3 cycles of renewal, and then you decide to sponsor a broker, to sponsor people. Now, it's true you've had the broker responsibility course 2 or 3 times. You say, well, that should be sufficient for you to know what you need to be able to do to sponsor salespeople. I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure you've really made a distinction, but I'd like for us, we can have further conversations. If we move forward now with the recommendation that in order to obtain a broker's license, you have to take the broker responsibility course, and all brokers, regardless whether they're sponsoring brokers or not, must take that course throughout the renewal period, then I would support that recommendation moving forward. And then with the thought that we'll have, based on what you hear from the commission, in our next meeting, we can have a further discussion about, is there any way to create some kind of a special something to people who say, okay, you've got a broker's license, you've done 2 or 3 year times of broker responsibility, but now you're going to sponsor agents. That's a new world. And here's how we have to do that. And maybe that's totally a Trek thing before they allow a broker to go through the process and accept sponsorship. I don't know, but I'd recommend us, at least as long as we include all brokers doing broker responsibility, support that moving forward to give us something with the commission to start talking about. And I see Leslie shaking her head. Gee, Bob, are you shaking at somebody else? You were shaking it.
Bob, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question, Bob? Because I want to make sure I understand.
Yes, sir.
Is there any overlap between the coursework, and I really don't know, is there an overlap between the coursework to make the application and take the test for the broker's license and the broker's responsibility requirement to have that be, at that same time? In other words, and I'm asking the question, are we asking somebody to double dip into the same coursework and the same education, the same information? I always thought the broker responsibility was really sort of updating and sort of bringing people up to speed on changes and sort of reminders. Whereas if you're taking the test and you've got the requirements to take the test, aren't you supposed to be at that point sort of up on your education? Why do you have to take it again? And that's why I'm asking the question is.
Okay, so if I can answer that specifically, as we looked at the qualifying courses and what you need, one, I don't see any redundancy there. I think that you're not being redundant to what you're already taking. I think this is a separate course. And the other, the broker responsibility course, in my opinion, is different than the legal 1 and 2, which is an update. Broker responsibility is a whole different animal. It's not just an update of what's happened lately, but it really is an emphasis on what broker responsibility means. And if the new course, as I've been hearing about, is good in that area as I think it is, then it's going to do a much better job of letting someone who's a broker understand what that means to be a broker and to be responsible. I think this really is perhaps as easy as Ty and the others are saying, adding that course to all the qualifying courses you have to take to get your broker's license. But that requirement is this, in that qualifying course is one specific course that you have to take to be able to obtain your broker's license. So I think that would resolve that. And I don't think it's redundant unless I misunderstand what all the courses have. But as I look at the qualifying courses that we looked at for your 900 hours or whatever hours we ended up with, I don't see any of those being the same as the broker responsibility course, especially the new additions as we hear are coming forward. So that'd be my answer to your question on that.
And I agree with Bob, because the broker responsibility course is constantly changing. Whenever we have statutory changes and rule changes, that broker responsibility course is rewritten every 2 years. I don't think that the brokerage course itself is rewritten every 2 years.
No,
That's right.
But it has been recently rewritten, this is what ESAC's putting forward, is that brokerage course, and I've got the outline open, that is intending to cover more broker responsibility agent relationship. They're also going to move forward with a recommendation to make real estate brokerage mandatory. So that's, I'm just letting you all know that's the direction that
Mandatory where?
headed in, as a qualifying.
For SAE.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. So that, just know that those recommendations are going to move forward, the new outline and that recommendation on the mandatory for SAE for the brokerage course.
I think that goes hand in hand then. with
Yeah.
Broker responsibility. If they're gonna do that, we might as well just push it through. Having the requirement for all brokers. It really makes sense. It's a perfect tie-in, because we're obviously, they see something that we see, so they see there's an issue. We're seeing there's an issue on competency as far as sponsoring agents.
If nothing else, we reinforce that.
Yeah, we're reinforcing exactly what they're doing. I think we make a motion on it.
Mm-hmm.
Chair would entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead.
Go ahead. So
Okay,
move. Let's make the motion.
let's do it, Bob. Let's
All right,
do
do we
it.
actually have
Make a
to,
recommendation
Yeah.
that the broker responsibility course has to be taken prior to obtaining a broker's license, and that all brokers must take the broker responsibility course in each of their renewals.
I'll second that.
so we have a motion, and just to clarify the motion, we have a motion that broker responsibility course be required prior to application for a broker's license. And that all brokers be required to take broker responsibility in each renewal.
Yes.
Yes.
The motion is,
Oh, so you want it for everyone's renewal too?
Everybody has to do it.
okay,
I missed that one.
we have a motion second. Is there any further discussion?
I'm going to basically, again, and I'm not trying to be difficult here or contrary, but I think, again, I think we're imposing stuff on folks that is not really necessary. And I really don't think we're solving any kind of big problems by creating additional educational requirements, costs, and timing requirements for people that that isn't already adequately provided for in our regulations. Again, I respect what everybody's saying and I get it. But I think we're being a little bit, I think we're being a little bit heavy-handed to folks that are trying to get into the business or people that are already in the business. But that, and again, I'm gonna vote no for the motion, not because I don't want to promote education and better practices, but I think it's regulation that we really don't need to impose on folks at this point.
Okay,
Call the vote.
all right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Motion passes. All right.
Yay.
So,
Good job, Bob. Good job.
yay indeed, but we're not.
We've done what the former group couldn't do in 3 years. So good job.
But we're not done just yet.
Oh, no, we're not.
Let's set a course if we can for what we want to discuss at the next meeting on this topic, and what do we need, if anything, from staff on that moving forward.
Wait, sorry.
Do we want to have y'all look at if there's any precedent with other states, that kind of thing?
We have all that. In a spreadsheet. Chance, question, because I know we've talked about this before. Talking about associated broker and where it falls into there, and because I know we've talked about, it's not listed under the sponsoring broker, even though they're working, like if it's your company, you have a broker, it's not listed under your sponsories or whatever, but God forbid if there's a lawsuit, you're probably still gonna be brought into it because they're under your umbrella.
Oh, God forbid, 100%.
Exactly, so I think we still need to talk about that and how that shakes out. I know it's been brought up before, and I would love to talk about delegated supervisors too. Having zero experience and zero anything, and could be named as delegated supervisor tomorrow.
That is probably a separate agenda item for next
Yeah.
time.
Well, can I address that real quick, actually?
Yeah.
So I may have a solution on that, but we don't have to do anything. So we just
It's my favorite.
created a motion to ask if everybody during renewal would take broker responsibility. So on a supervisor, they have to take it.
Yeah.
So if everyone takes it, it eliminates the issue of them not having any education going into being a supervisor at that point.
But a
That's
delegated
already the
supervisor
rule.
doesn't have to be a broker.
No, but I'm saying a supervisor, because if let's just say Chance makes me a supervisor today at his brokerage.
Right.
And so during my next renewal, I then have to take broker responsibility,
Mhm.
right? If this motion passes what we just did, it then makes it where I already have had to take it,
If it's everybody.
if it's everybody.
Oh, if it's
it's
everybody,
everybody.
but I thought the motion was
That's right.
only brokers.
The
Right,
motion
And
is
then we
on
were
the-
gonna try
Right.
to
You were
do.
going-
but we
yes.
can, yes, but
Yes.
it was, the other discussion was, and it would eliminate that issue
Correct.
on that problem.
So we need to put that as pending, seeing what goes on.
Your
Okay.
comment at the meeting on
Correct.
next month. Okay,
But the
Cool.
associated broker, I do think we need to talk about.
and let's make that part of our discussion when we come back in January for sure. As part of this, let's just talk about what that looks like. So I think, this is a pretty open discussion on quote unquote, different types of brokers. Okay, so we feel good about this, and we're gonna have a more in-depth discussion next meeting. All right, moving on. And I'm gonna be completely honest, because I don't even remember us talking about this at the last meeting. We had discussion regarding E&O insurance requirements for LLCs and how it relates to sales agents.
So this came up at the end of the meeting as a possible topic, and I think it might have really been more of a question and some confusion. What I did was I included in your materials, the language of the requirements, and I just wasn't sure. It was asked to be put on the next agenda item. I'm not sure if there is a discussion point on it. If there is, it's here.
I think Bob had asked the question last time, I remember, because I was sitting right next to him the last time. And he'd asked about the insurance and then sponsoring business entities and being able to pay out through a business entity and using his current, I'm just going off of memory,
Yeah,
using
I
his
think
current E&O insurance to cover those entities.
And so really all, from the Trek side of things, we require, and Denise may be able to speak better to this than I am, but, we require that proof of insurance. I don't know that we get into the who has what, et cetera. I think we just require that level of proof of insurance.
So basically, if it shows,
If it's less than the 10%, right?
yeah, if let's say soccer, you sponsor me, I start up my little LLC brokerage and you're like, yeah, go do it, put some signs in the yard. And
No, I
then,
wouldn't do that.
and your E&O, and I say, well, can I just use your E&O policy for your company? And you're like, yeah, I think that's what Bob was asking. Am I right, Bob?
Yeah, and oops, sorry.
Oh,
No.
you were.
It was, and we have, as Vanessa pointed out, we have a Trek form that we have to send to our E&O company, and they have to certify the insurance. That goes along with the application for the business entity. And so that particular part is done. And so, and that, the other criteria, part of that is the broker doesn't own 10% of the entity. And so because of that, we can use our E&O insurance as an umbrella for that LLC. Broker's not required to do it, but Trek says, well, we've got to have some assurance that this entity has E&O insurance, and your E&O insurance company should, I've never had one, didn't have a problem with signing off on that form, and we send that in with the application. So that's taken care of as we go through that.
Okay.
Reported to.
It looks like Brian has a hand.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Just for perspective, I know that Texas Realtors is investigating the opportunity to offer health insurance to independent contractors under a group. And as that shakes out, Texas Realtors members who want to participate or may be able to participate in that program may be required to form an LLC in order to participate. So there's some moving parts there that create some hurdles. And just, as independent contractors and being able to get group health insurance, that's a big deal. And if that requirement, it requires an LLC to be formed for them to be able to participate, that E&O insurance is a hurdle. And so that's part of the discussion I know that's happening at Texas Realtors. Back is just a conversation. When we're sponsoring agents, we're encouraging them as independent contractors to operate themselves as a business. You are Chance Brown Incorporated, and doing so, creating an LLC is really a smart business move for an agent. Regardless of their sponsorship, it's a smart business move for an agent to set themselves up as a business, create an LLC, set up their own finances and budget, and et cetera. But the E&O insurance is a hurdle. As a sponsoring broker, we're not a member of their particular LLC. So it just, is it a necessary requirement for that LLC, just an agent doing business, but doing business as a business and professionally? Is it really a requirement that they have that E&O insurance? They are operating under our brokerage, we're carrying that insurance, and it just seems like double dipping. And so regardless of what Texas Realtors is doing with the health insurance, just as a professional business, I think my agents ought to set up an LLC, but they hesitate doing so because of the E&O insurance requirement. That's just fact.
Okay, so
I think Bob's got the answer though. Bob just uses.
Well, the reality is, I mean, the E&O is resolved in the manner I just talked about earlier with the form that goes in that the E&O company signs off on. There are a couple other issues though, Brian, in setting up the entity. One is the TREC requirement as you go through it, that if it's an LLC, then the sponsoring broker has to be a member, has to be a managing member of that LLC, or if it's a partnership or an S Corp or a C Corp. So those are TREC requirements, and Vanessa, correct me if I missed out on some of that, but those are TREC requirements, and you see that in your 4-page application for the business entity that talks about the sponsoring broker and their involvement in the LLC. So when an agent, if they think it's a good business decision and you think it's a good business decision to set up an LLC, there are certain requirements, including doing those and registering with the state so that they've got that status of their the franchise and everything, and then that their sponsoring broker is that. And one of the challenges with that, and I've gone through it a couple of times, is that the agreement, the LLC, the partnership, whatever it is, that the agent has put together, has had their attorney draw up, the language and the responsibility of the sponsoring broker as a managing member of that LLC is a challenge. And so the language in that has to be really important, because if you don't have the correct language, what you have is a sponsoring broker that now has controls and responsibilities that LLC may not be comfortable with. We've had agents before we made sure that the correct language, their attorney put the correct language in there. The agent said, well, I don't want my sponsoring broker to be a manager and to be in charge of my LLC. Well, that literally is the language that an attorney can do in the agreement and resolve that. But the reality is, doing an LLC is not a quick and simple and easy thing. We've got to go through all the steps of the application with TREC. TREC requires to be a member of. TREC requires you have the E&O, which is solved easily by the brokerage using their E&O if the E&O company signs off on it. So I think those get resolved pretty easily. The tricky thing that we had to make sure agents understood is that if they've got an LLC, the only reason they really have that LLC, they can do it for whatever their CPA thinks. They can receive commissions in that LLC as opposed to personally, but they don't get to use it in any of their advertising. They don't get to say, Joe Blow LLC, Joe Blow, manager of, Joe Blow, partner of. TREC, those are part of the advertising violations that you'd have. So they don't get to put it on their business cards. They don't do any advertising. That whole corporation that they've set up is totally internal for them to deal with what their CPA sets up. We had, some that do it for different reasons. But one, you don't get any liability protection because you don't get to set up a corporate shield because you don't advertise with it. You don't get to use that. So it's important for the sponsoring broker to make sure their agents, when they do an LLC, understand the true function of it and what's really going. And here are the requirements. And it's not a requirement of the sponsoring broker; it's a requirement of TREC. If you're going to have a business entity and the sponsoring broker can pay that business entity directly, here's what needs to be in place. Am I right on that, Vanessa? Are we good with what I think I understand about how that works?
I'm good with it, Bob. Yes.
Good, thank you.
I think Chance brought up a good point of LLCs cause a lot of confusion. We get a lot of questions. Depending on what happens this session, we may be even getting more questions or less. So I think this was Chance's idea, and I'm going to take it to heart, which is perhaps the new legal updates, in particular if there are some changes legislatively, can provide some more clarity on this whole topic. It's always confusing.
Well, because my fear would be, well, not my fear, my best guess is that most brokers are probably doing this wrong and won't find out until they get sued.
Yeah.
So,
True, I mean, I'm being serious. The truth is, they're probably not doing that form with their E&O correctly, and they won't find out until a lawsuit gets filed. Would be my guess. Go ahead, Brian.
and so Bob, as you talk about it being a simple fix, my perspective is it's not simple. And so I think maybe more information. You talked about a 4-page application that Trek provides, as well as some language that your attorneys have provided in that independent contractor agreement or in the LLC resolution itself. So I think some of those materials might be helpful. But my further question is it appropriate for this group? Is this a topic that's appropriate for this group? And I think maybe so, particularly pertaining to Chance's comment that most brokers might be doing it wrong. So those are my comments.
Thank you, sir. So this is my suggestion is let's come back in January to our next meeting with a copy of this statute, a copy of the 4-page application, so that all of us are on the same page about what exactly is the right way to do this. And then I think from there, if I'm breaking out my crystal ball, my best guess here is that we kick this to ESAC with a recommendation for including a real, hey, this is how this should be done in the next legal one. But if there's anything that we need to recommend to commission, that after looking at all that and making sure that we all know what the heck we're talking about, then we can do that.
Yep.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right, so let's do that. We're gonna move that to the January meeting with all the materials that we need to be fully informed, and then if we need to make a recommendation either to the commission or to ESAC, we can do so from there.
Are you going over legislative things?
No.
Are we talking, what happened with our recommendation from last time about hours and experience and everything? Is that going?
Yeah, that you
Okay.
guys workshopped that to move forward.
Okay,
So
so
that's-
hours did?
Yeah.
Meaning,
Yeah.
I remember changing form, which is really.
This is the cap, the rulemaking cap for education, sorry, talking about.
So
Changing from 9:30 to 6:20 and
yeah,
Yeah.
doing away with college credit and all that
Yeah.
stuff,
I
unless it's specific to.
Real estate.
Understand.
I don't know about the real estate college credit thing. I just
Yeah.
I don't know that you can remove that. But the 60 to, I always say the numbers are different, and the numbers in statute are different. So what we're seeking is a rulemaking authority to determine the education, so that way you can toggle the education experience via rule. And so that is in the works via government relations and all.
so is the real estate college course thing included to see if it goes, or has it been left out, or what's going on?
I think the college course component is in rule.
It is?
Yeah, that's a rule thing. And so that discussion can continue. I think it would be a real tough removal.
No, we weren't removing, we were removing automatic credit for, I mean, so if somebody has an anthropology degree,
Yeah.
that doesn't have
It doesn't.
anything
Or
to do with
kinesiology.
I mean, yeah, I have an electrical engineering, that doesn't have anything to do with real estate
I
at
think we
all.
had said class for class.
Yeah, class for class, we said that they could get credit, but just blanket, basket weaving, you don't get, those extra hours given for that. That's what we were saying, right?
So I
Yes.
think, yeah, that was part of the recommendation, and we can look at that in rule. The only thing I would say is that college degree, we did look into it, that has been in rule for a very long time. That would be an incredibly significant change to your requirements to get a license.
This class for class.
Well, you would eliminate essentially the 4-year degree, that's got you there. I'm just saying, in terms of like making things, barriers to entry, to remove that, something that's been in place that long would be significant. It's not that we can't look at it, it's not a legislative change, so we can't.
So if it's not a legislative change and it's through rule, who is the one that says yay or nay?
Regulatory compliance.
Okay, because we just want the classes to pertain to finance and real estate. So if somebody has all English, or all drama, or all whatever, that
Right.
just doesn't
Could
get.
be a bunch of different things.
My art
Yeah.
history degree is.
Like mine's electrical, it has nothing to do with real estate.
But did you
Partial
get,
differential equation, no, I didn't. And the reason I didn't is because I knew in my heart that it did not have
Help you.
anything to do with real estate. So I did it the long way because I did not want to use a degree that has nothing to do with real estate to get my broker's license.
but right, I think you are truly the exception,
Okay.
right?
I
Yeah.
mean, I have a
Well-
business degree, so I have some.
Well, see, business,
Well,
that
business
has
makes
way
a little more
to do
sense
with
at
it.
least, you know?
So the recommendation it's out there, we've got it. I think what we need to tackle first is the legislative component and, just maybe that recommendation ends up walking through ESOC. I have to visit with Jen and Denise on where that rule change would come from.
Brian? You have your hand up? Okay, just kidding. Okay. Any other agenda items, anything for the future meetings that we want to put on agenda? No. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 11th, 2023.
Oh my goodness, to
That's
say that
weird to
out
say, right?
loud.
Didn't make any sense.
That's crazy. So, seeing nothing further, this meeting is adjourned and we'll see you next year.
Oh my goodness.
That's weird.
Oh, it's
That's
really weird to say.
freaking me out.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks for a great discussion. Thanks.